Now let's transform an ugly default button into a nice one. As you can see, I have a simple document right here. All I have is the button tag in my body tag with the text of button. And this is how the default button in HTML look like on our website. Now let's make it prettier. Let's create a style tag in our head tag. And let's refer to the button tag just like this. As we know, the button has the property of display inline block by default. So it lines up in one line as the inline element, but we can style its size and the properties of its box model with full control as with the block element. To reset the appearance of the button, we can change its background color to white, like this, and its border to none, like this. Now all we have is the text button written with the font Arial, which is also default for the button in the Chrome browser. So this is the total reset of our button, and now we can style it however we want. So let's do it. Let's leave this background color as white, as it is, but let's change its border. Let's set it to 3 pixels, solid, black. Let's see. As I said, the order of these values don't matter. We could use, for example, black, solid, 3 pixels, like this. The effect would be the same. As we know, we can define border with separate properties. For example, border color for black, border style like this for solid, and border width, which you can see right here, for 3 pixels. But I always place it in a short border property, and I usually make it like this, that I place the width, style, and color. It's just my habit, my preference, that's all. Now let's set the original zoom of our preview. As you can see, the button is small, so let's change its font size to 30 pixels, like this. Let's give it a text transform with the uppercase value, just like this. Now we can see that our text is uppercase. We can use a letter spacing property, for example, to 2 pixels. This will create the spaces between our letters. Let's see it. As you can see, if we place, for example, 5 pixels, those spaces would be bigger. You can ask yourself if it looks good or not, but let's leave it with 2 pixels for now. Let's change its font weight to bold. Let's see it. All right. And let's add some paddings, because since it's inline block, we can set its height and width, but there's a second way of changing the size of our button by giving this button a proper paddings. For example, 10 pixels from the top and the bottom, and 30 pixels from the left and the right. And it looks pretty nice in my opinion. Let's say now we want to center this element. If it would be a block element, we could do this with the margin property. But since it's inline block, we have to do it differently. We have to use the text align property on the parent element, because this element is treated as an inline element and inline elements are treated as a plain text in relation to their parent. Let me show this to you. If we would use, let's get this padding from here. And let's place our properties how they should be, just to create proper habits. So the properties related to the box model, and then the aesthetic properties related only to the appearance of our element. So the properties related to the fonts, colors, and text transforming. So now let's say we want to add margin 0 auto to center this element. Let's save our file. And we can see that it doesn't actually work, because this trick works only for the block elements. And since our button is inline block, we have to refer to its parent, which is the body tag, and use the text align property with the value of center. So the body's inline children will be centered inside it. And as we know, in our body, we have only one element, which is the button. So let's save our file. And voila. Our button now is centered from the left and the right, and it's in the middle of our website. And this trick doesn't work in the other way. When we change our button to display block, the text align property on the body tag doesn't work. But as we know, now we could use the margin property with 0 auto value, and the effect would be the same. But let's keep it how it was. Let's delete this margin. Let's delete this display block property, and voila. But we can separate it from the top edge of the browser window using the margin top property to, for example, 100 pixels. Let's see it. And it's good, in my opinion. Now we can see the button clearly, and it looks good. But now let's say we want our button to behave differently when we hover on it with our mouse cursor. So we should already know the hover pseudo class. We can refer to our button, and after colon, refer to its pseudo class hover, like this. And everything placed into this CSS rule will be applied when we will hover our mouse on our button. Let's say we want its background color to go to black, and its color go to white. Let's save the file. Let's see the effect. And you can see everything works perfectly fine. When we hover on our button, it changes the background color and the color of the text. But you can see that this change is instant. It changes immediately. We can delay this process with the transition property. We have to go back again to our button CSS rule and place transition property with the time we want this change to be applied in. For example, let's place 1 second. We always have to use the second unit as a value in this property because it won't work. And now let's see what I'm talking about. When we hover on our button, after 1 second, it goes smoothly to the properties set in the hover pseudo class, as you can see right here. Of course, 1 second is too long. Usually we want to place 0.2 seconds. Let's see it. Now this change is quite smooth. It might be as well 0.3 seconds. And I think now it's actually fine. Now, here's the bonus information using transition property. First thing, if you don't place the unit, leaving only the number as a value, this won't work. As you can see, there's no transition. The changes applies immediately. So you have to place the unit. And a common mistake when starting to know the transition property is that we don't place it in a button CSS rule or our element CSS rule, but in the hover pseudo class CSS rule. Now, this may cause some problems because in some browsers it will not work. As you can see in Google Chrome right now, this actually works. Even if we set the 1 second, for example, you can see this works, but it may cause problems in other browsers or in some older browsers. So it's always good to keep the transition property inside our element CSS rule and not our pseudo class hover CSS rule. The last bonus information is that we can write the value simpler and quicker, simply without placing the 0 ahead of our number. It will mean the same for the browser. It will be computed with no problem. And this is how usually I place such values for the transition property. This works fine, as you can see. So we managed to style our button and transform ugly default HTML button to a nice one on our website. So now it's time for your assignment.